so that patients will have more choices. Marc, actually, this isn't like everyone ganging up on the person from the big company day, so I'm not going to do that. I would like to maybe start off with, actually, even one of the questions talks about the value of checking glucose frequently, and you can appreciate the value of the technology that you guys have, one of the many technologies you guys are advancing, CGM. So I thought maybe you could talk about both what your sort of overall vision, particularly around CGM, but then also circle back to some of the data sharing challenges.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here, and thank you, Robin, for telling us your journey through type 2 diabetes. So thank you so much. I've spent my entire career working on helping to eliminate the dreaded finger stick. I've been at Abbott Diabetes Care for the last 17 years, and all that time spent working on continuous glucose monitors. And we have a long history in this space. A continuous glucose monitor is a small device. It's worn on the back of the arm. Our Freestyle Libre system, it's worn on the back of the arm for 14 days, and it gives glucose values every minute. When a user wants to scan their sensor with a smartphone running our app or a reader, able to get their glucose value, the trend arrow indicating which direction their glucose is going, their glucose value at that minute, and their glucose history, how they got there, in a painless, easy to do way. When Robin talked about not measuring her blood glucose anymore because it was, she didn't know what to do with the information, it was painful, it was things that, it's not a natural thing to do. People are supposed to, test their blood up to four times a day, 10 times a day. It's difficult. People don't want to do it outside of the house. There's a lot of resistance to doing it. Well, products like continuous glucose monitors make that easy to access. Dense glucose data that can be used by the patient to help make informed treatment decisions, to better dose their insulin, but also by the healthcare team to help make medication and lifestyle changes and therapy modifications to help their patients. And at Abbott Diabetes Care, we're committed to getting this data into the both available to the patients. That's how our devices primarily work. They're seen directly by the patient, but as well as into the caregiver and healthcare team's clinical workflow. That's why we developed products like LibreView, where it's a cloud-based data management system where data from Libre is able to be seen in this cloud-based data management system. It's why we developed apps like our Libre Link app, which goes directly from the phone automatically up into LibreView and then to the Libre Link up, where a caregiver or a loved one can see the results in real time as the user's receiving that data. But
does your system compel people to use your specific are people forced into the ecosystem? Does the data from your very highly regarded CGM wind up? It's not like there's a variety. In other words, you might have a great CGM, your app may be great or not, your platform may be great or not, but there's not really a competition for that if the data can only go there.
Sure, we have a number of partners that we do work with in this space, but it's also the reason why we developed a specific version of LibreView for the Veterans Health Administration. So we made a version of LibreView Gov, where we actually got FedRAMP certified. I believe we were the first software as a service to achieve FedRAMP status, sponsored by the VA, where we have where we're a moderate level of security.
Yeah.
So I think we've shown the value that we place on making sure that the patient data is available within the hands of the caregiving team. We're also working to put patient data into the EHR. We've recently announced first of its kind working with health partners and the International Diabetes Center to get Libre data directly into the EHR to help manage diabetes.
Thanks, Marc. So before we get to the audience questions, which I'm going to get to in just a few minutes, I thought maybe we could wrap up. I want this section with two different folks. First of all, Dr. Samuel, having listened to all of this, I'd welcome to see your sort of integrated assessment of what you've heard. And then before we go to the audience questions, I'd really welcome Robin's perspective on what she's heard as well. So
I think everybody that has spoken kind of reiterated a lot of the points that I raised. I'm literally going to see a patient within an hour who had a gastric bypass. His diabetes has almost gone away. He wears a LibreView. I just looked at his data this morning. And we have some points to kind of iron out as why his sugars are spiking at certain times of the day. So everything that has been discussed, it's happening in real time. It's gonna directly affects me. I think having data integration is critical. A lot of us who are clinically active live within a certain EHR environment. So for us to leave CPRS and go to another platform to view data is somewhat disruptive in our workflow. I think the ability to bring all that data within our EMR, which is CPRS or Cerner, would be critical to kind of help smooth data access and use that data for clinical care.
Terrific. By the way, I really appreciated your overview. I thought there were so many different points that you raised, and I kind of feel like every startup should get a hold of your slides. And before they sort of say, we're going to disrupt and democratize and everything else they're going to do, I think they should read and learn your 10, 15 slide deck and make sure that they have a thoughtful perspective on it. Before we go to Robin, I wanted to talk to Jon, the CEO of Podimetrics. And in a sense, I think I may have skipped over him because his company has come up so often. I feel like he's almost been represented by proxy, but let's hear the real thing. Jon, I want to talk, your Podimetrics has come up in many contexts here as a solution or as an approach to for preventive care that seems to have worked really well for Robin. What was striking to me is not only in the data that it brought back, but in the reminding her by being so simple, where you get up and you step on this thing, of the importance of thinking about it as well. So Jon, your perspective?
Well, thank you a ton for having me here. And Robin, if you'd ever want to chat, I would of course be thrilled to hear about your experiences and your journey. Thank you for taking the time to come and join us. Yeah, so diabetic foot is probably one of the biggest unmet challenges in diabetes. It's been linked to about a third of the cost of diabetes, around 80 to 100 billion. But the VA alone had reported they were spending $3.2 billion on diabetic foot every year, which is typical for a national carrier. A national payroll would be anywhere from 2 to 5 billion. This problem just persisted for so long, and yet we know often that these wounds are happening before they present. So that's always been the challenge. And it disproportionately affects patients who are minority populations, rural veterans. We have to build systems that are extremely accessible to be able to get into the homes and actually have monitoring that works and actually get outcomes. I think one of the most critical things is just you need to study systems like ours in that real world environment when you don't have a ton of research assistants running around pushing the study across. Like that's most important. Do you actually affect hard outcomes? And are you preventing the morbidity, mortality, and resource utilization associated with the part? And I'll just comment briefly on the results of how our program has worked. Probably the best study we have is from Kaiser Permanente. It was just a commercial evaluation that we did, and we're able to publish it. We were able to show in a very high risk cohort there that we prevented around 71% of amputations and a complete elimination of major amputations. So no one lost a limb to diabetes on our watch for that evaluation. And we saved about $12,000 in savings per patient per year in that plan year, driven by three main things, which is I think critical as you're studying the impact of the system. On all-cause hospitalization, we dropped by 52%. We dropped all-cause ER visits by 40% and all-cause outpatient visits by 26%. So I think it's critical for digital health for any of these systems to look at the hard outcomes that you impact, and of course, its impact to make sure it's a responsible part of the ecosystem. So thrilled to be here.
Right.
The VA has been an amazing partner for us since 2013.
Right. So that's terrific. I want to conclude with Robin right before we get to that. I think one of the themes I'm hearing about from several of the speakers is really the importance of bringing data and of having hard outcomes. I also think it's important that not to fetishize data, and all data aren't created equal. A lot of the studies, not necessarily any of the specific ones mentioned here, but in general for intervention, they're often in very enriched patients or highly motivated patient populations, and they tend to do better than an unselected population, for example. So sometimes generalizations can be challenging. So Robin, what do you think? Are folks kind of getting it, kind of not getting it? Are there points that you'd have liked to hear more about that folks should get to in the next Q&A? You're on mute.
No, it sounds like you guys are addressing stuff. I'm appreciative of what Michelle was saying about the security of our data. I also feel like the risk outweighs the reward, but of course, that's stuff that needs to constantly be monitored. And as far as like John was saying about the smart mat, and any technology that sort of follows their model, that personally for me has worked wonderful. It has helped me immensely to know that there might be something going on in my feet. So thank you, John. But other than that, no, I think you guys are doing good. I really appreciate this format, and
Great.
I know that staying in contact and that accountability for the patient for me is something that would be very important, because being human, I'm like, so that accountability thing and doing it in this format, as long as people can understand how to use it. I consider myself to be about 50% technologically savvy. But I think a lot of people my age and older are not. So it's difficult for them. And they might need like one-on-one instruction somehow in order to learn how to use the technology.
So
That might be the biggest obstacle.
That last point that you're raising really connects beautifully with several of the questions that we've gotten from the audience, which I would distill down into saying you phrased it in a much more thoughtful way, but the way I think it would sort of almost distill into a formality is the last mile problem. There's all this, we say in Boston, wicked cool tech, but then how do you distill it down into something that is customized and suitable for each of the individual people who you're trying to deliver it to and who are trying to benefit from it? Are there any, we don't have to go in any order, are there any folks who want to just shout out and weigh in on the sort of how you're thinking about this last mile, so this cool technology that's being developed ultimately finds expression in the care and treatment of patients like Robin?
Yeah, maybe one of the things I'll chime in on, in the work that we've been doing across the 14 centers in the VA with Dr. Samuel, we found exactly that and it wasn't the way we started through the process, but we've learned over time that it really does require kind of a white glove service for helping people on board and understand and get ready to go, which seems very counterintuitive to a very tech-enabled kind of solution. But the initial components of getting people onboarded and being able to effectively answer their questions, there's a lot of education.
So like a technology Sherpa, right? Novia had somebody like that at one point, I think. Marc, I know we just have so many people. I want to kind of get everyone to weigh in a little bit. I felt like you were about to weigh in as well. I didn't want to cut you off.
Yeah, absolutely. We spend a lot of time on human factors, designing, these devices from the very beginning to be easy to use by patients. How do we think about how do they hold the device in their hands? How do they interact with the UI of the reader and the phone? And it's the reason why these devices have become so easy to use and insertions become so easy to use that patients accept them. And it's the reason why there's 3.5 million users today on the Freestyle Libre system.
Well, Michelle, I know you think about this from every possible perspective. What's your view of this last mile challenge?
I think it's important that we remember that we have diverse patient populations that may be at different levels of digital health literacy, and having those navigators that are frequent touch, high touch, that recognize the cultural experience of those people, I think is really important. And not considering that in the delivery and implementation, I think will really impede uptake and not lead to the goals that we're all hoping to see happen. I also saw a question about how do we get there. One thing I did want to applaud, and I know Jen Goldsack is leading one of the collaborative communities on how we can bring some of these digital health technologies and to address some of the underserved patient population's needs. So I do think working collaboratively across the ecosystem, not leaving any of the stakeholders out, but understanding that we're all critical elements in advancing change is important. So I want to applaud Data CC, which I know is one of the collaborative communities trying to champion this particular topic.
Cybele and Sean, any other final comments on this as we're running out of time?
Yeah, I'll share an important perspective that companies need to design technology that's easy to use, not just hope that people can use technology. My mom, I kid you not, is famous inside Omada because I always tell our teams anything we design has to pass the Sean Duffy's mom test. And my mom is just fine opening an app, getting a website. But if I ask my mom to pair a Wi-Fi scale with her home network, she's calling me. So it's an orientation per Marc's comments. You have to really think deeply about the user, human factors, the user experience, and allow tech to be very, very simple in order to enable broad access.
Wow. I'm going to get Cybele, and then we're going to close off with Jon, because I think that his device, the thing that even your mom could figure out how to use, where you step on it, assuming the pairing is automatic. But Cybele, I wanted to get you first. Go ahead.
I was just going to, piggyback and say, yes, I like the Sean Duffy mom test. I think that's something we could all keep in mind. And just really, it is the beauty of digital health that we're going to take together, all of us as innovators and everybody else who's looking to solve care in the 21st century, the best use of tech with our human clinicians and patients, and figure out how to scale appropriately so that you can get the human interaction where you need it and use tech to support where you can't. But it goes back to what Robin's saying. My notes are listen to Robin and build the trust and rapport and identify the value to the patient, because it's got to be important to them in order to change, and then keep supporting them and moving through it. And you can do that through tech, and you need humans as well.
Jon, I'm actually going to give you the last word, because I know that your company is particularly focused on accessibility issues.
It's huge. It's funny. I also use the Jon Bloom dad test. He's a veteran with diabetes, and he still has a VCR at home that's blinking midnight. And if he ever gets a Wi-Fi error, he's going to call me, or he doesn't call. It's just going to stay disconnected. So it's like identify all the gaps where things could break down.
My daughters
Any pairings
are
that fail
available
point.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. No pairings. It needs to work out of the box. It needs to have cellular connection. It was a big part of figuring out how to get to this patient population who often can't afford internet. A lot of these things that we think they would have, or a smartphone, it has to work in every home. So it was a huge part for us, and clearly for everyone on this panel, it's such an important work for us to make sure that we're getting accessible technology to the patients that need it.
Wow, well, that's fantastic. It's really inspiring that there's so many people who are focused on this. And the other thing that's it's real life. The other thing that's really interesting is, having been in this space for, like Marc, as Sean will say, over a decade, it's so great to see that folks are so much more grounded and are, dealing with the real problems. Again, Dr. Samuel's overview at the very beginning, I really just can't overemphasize I thought it was an excellent overview of the challenges that the field faces, and that's the focus on really on folks like Robin, and really making sure, because there are so many great ideas that, I can't say how many pitches I've heard where people have, here's some great technology, and no one's thought in the sufficient depth about how someone's actually going to use it, about whether it's John's dad or Sean's dad or someone's or patients like Robin, about how it's actually going to work and really solving the last mile challenge. So it seems like there's definitely some areas to go in terms of walled gardens and data ecosystem. But I'm so grateful that there's so many fantastic folks working, hopefully relatively collectively, on these important problems to improve the care of veterans and all people. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Smith, I believe, or to Jennifer, and give us further guidance.
Fantastic. Colleagues, this was an absolutely tremendous panel. Robin, you focused our attention right from the start here on the most important person in all of this, the patient. Really appreciate your remarks. I was delighted Congressman Rice could get on and share his bold vision that he shares with Representative DeGette for the Prevent Diabetes Act. David, Michelle, Marc, Sean, Russ, Jon, Varman, Cybele, absolutely tremendous. And I think what you've done so nicely is not sort of think about the technologies as sort of point solutions, right? Drawing from our previous session, but really thinking about a suite of tools, a holistic approach to care. And we've got to the ultimate question around sort of data access, integration, interoperability. How do we actually drive towards a learning healthcare system that's built around the patient, that's built around prevention? That will be the topic for our next session after the break. The leaning tower of data, the infrastructure required for access at scale. So appreciate all of you on the line. We learned a great deal. Take a 7-minute break, everyone. I'll pop a slide up and we'll be back with the leaning tower of data in just a few minutes. Thank you so much.